I'm delighted to be your host again tonight, Chris Robb, the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. And we've got a wonderful action-packed 2 hours and 15 minutes for you this evening. The inclusion episode, practical insights to help embed diversity into your events. I'm coming to you from a studio here in Bali. Delighted to be with you for, as I say, about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Repeating, fantastic. Over 300 people registered from 64 countries tonight. We are live streaming on Facebook, on the MPW Facebook page, and we are also live streaming, again, as usual, into China, thanks to our friends Julia Chui, Jerry and Hao from CGX Consulting there. Thank you so much. Tonight is very much more of a conversational session, so there are not a lot of presentations. We have 2 presentations, and the decks for those will be available. As always, after the show, we'll make them available, as well as I say, we are recording or live on Facebook, but we're also recording, and we will make a post-produced version of that available within a couple of days on the YouTube channel and through MPW Academy. And let's then get into the amazing program that we have tonight. Immediately after I've finished the introduction, we're going to start with a case study from London Marathon Events. We'll be joined by Hamid Vaghefian, who is the head of community engagement for London Marathon Events, and Michelle Weltman, the head of disability for London Marathon Events. They will be joining myself and Alessio Punzi in conversation. And following that, we move on to a really interesting segment titled The Privilege and the Responsibility. This is a pre-produced recording which I did yesterday with Madison de Rozario. She's an Australian Paralympian who's about to get on a plane to fly to Boston, well known to the World Marathon Majors. She's a 4-time Paralympian, and that was an interview that I did with her yesterday, about a 20-minute session from her with some wonderful insights from an athlete perspective. We will then move on to a short update on new eligibility regulations for athletes who are transgender or who have differences of sexual development, DSD. That will be a session, there'll be a short presentation by Paolo Emilio Adami, MD, PhD, who's the medical manager, Health and Science Department at World Athletics, and there will be an opportunity for any questions that you have, albeit that it's a short section. If we're not able to answer all the questions live, Paolo's committed that he will certainly come back to you, so those will be in the chat. We then move on to a segment called Motherhood and Marathons, and we'll be joined by Michelle Sammet, who's the Stakeholder Communications Manager for World Athletics, a previous guest on these webinars. And she'll be joined by Nadia, Dgaher, who's the Communications and PR Manager for SCC Events, who many of you would recognize as the organizers of the BMW Berlin Marathon. And that'll start out as a conversation with me involved and then continue between Michelle and Nadia. From there, we go from Europe across to my neck of the woods into Asia, and we have a wonderful session including women in Asia. And it's a conversation between myself and Riena Tambunan, who's the founder of PT Dunia, Olah, Raga, which for those of you that don't know Bahasa means Jakarta Free Spirit. An incredible story that Riena is going to share with us of how she has really catapulted running, and particularly women's running, into the limelight here and facilitated opportunities for so many people. She is also the race director of the Jakarta Marathon. And then we go back to the other side of the world, and we'll be joined by Vanessa Peralta-Mitchelll. Sorry, get that right, Vanessa. Vanessa Peralta-Mitchelll, who is the owner of VCPM, and she will be sharing an amazing program which she set up, the Game Changers program, empowering women of color as certified run coaches, and some really great insights from there. And then the final lap, we hand the baton to Alessio Punzi, and he's going to share with us, Alessio, and I noticed, Alessio, when I was doing my research that you've had a title change, so make sure that I get that right. If I've got it here, you are now, sorry Alessio, where's my correct sheet here? You're now the head of running and mass participation at World Athletics, which is wonderful. Alessio will give us those updates, and then I'll come back to wrap up the show. But now, as we start the show, let's welcome our guest for our first segment, delighted to welcome to the screen Hamid Vaghefian. Hamid, I always get your pronunciation wrong despite practicing and practicing. Hamid Vaghefian, and he is the head of community engagement at London Marathon Events. And we're also going to be joined by, welcome Hamid, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you too.
Michelle Weltman, the head of disability at London Marathon Events. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, nice to see you. Thank you. We have Alessio Punzi joining us as well. So welcome, Alessio. Nice to see you, Hamid and Michelle. And London Marathon really have been somewhat of a pioneer in this space in terms of engaging with lesser service communities, with athletes with disability. And maybe we'll ask Michelle and Alessio just to step into the background for a little while I have a short conversation with Hamid. Hamid, I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit about your role as a head of community engagement at London Marathon Events, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Chris. So my role as head of community engagement at LME is really focused on our participation objective and looking at how we inspire underrepresented communities across all of our event portfolio to get more engaged in our events, but also to inspire them to be active all year round. So we do a huge amount of work with community organizations, with schools, with community groups, faith organizations, and trying to really kind of reach out to those communities to inspire them to get more involved. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about some of the initiatives that we've set up through this talk.
Wonderful. Yeah, let's go straight into that and maybe just share a little bit about your approach to engaging underrepresented communities. And you've already touched on who some of those are, but maybe exploring a little bit more in terms of maybe a few examples of some of the work that you've done there, please.
Sure, no problem. So I think to truly understand our approach, I think we probably need to step back a little bit to our kind of founders back in 1981 when we were set up. We were set up in such a way whereby our profits would go straight back into community facilities and inspire activity amongst those communities. Since then, our profits have been given to the London Marathon Foundation, which has supported hundreds of projects in London and beyond, and specifically targeted underrepresented communities. And the reason I share that is because I think it's important to understand the why we do what we do. And we always kind of revert back to this because we want to inspire activity and really make a positive change to society. So moving forward, what we've done is we've developed an organizational strategic plan, which ensures we diversify our participants across the board. And our objective there is really to inspire, encourage, and provide opportunities for people across all demographics to be active. Fast forward to 2018, when I first got involved with LME, and we were launching a new half marathon called the Big Half, whereby we wanted that event to truly reflect the diversity of London. Now, as you'll know, London is one of the most diverse cities in the world. Around 45% of the population are from ethnically diverse backgrounds. So when you compare that to the average running event at the time in the UK or even in London, the highest percentage of ethnic diversity you were seeing was around 5 to 10%. Wow. Majority of the events were overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly middle class. So our approach has very much focused a lot on increasing the ethnic diversity of our events, whilst at the same time acknowledging that there are, of course, other protected characteristics and areas where we're also trying to engage, more women, more LGBTQ plus community and disabled participants too. And one of the starting points, I think, for us has been, data collection. And you'd be amazed how many organisers still are not collecting the relevant data to understand where there are gaps and where they need to improve. So for us, having that baseline understanding of, what are the percentage of participants within our events that come from certain demographic backgrounds is really important to understand whether we're making progress or not. Secondly, I'd say we do a huge amount of community outreach. And by that, I don't just mean, kind of leafleting residents to say your event is happening. I mean, very much, meeting communities where they're at, connecting with them, building authentic relationships to engage and inspire them to take part. We're very privileged in London and the UK, whereby we have a really thriving community sports sector. And, you know, we've seen a huge growth and proliferation of kind of diverse running crews in recent years. So we work really closely with them to build their capacity. I know it's something Vanessa is going to talk about later, but, you know, building their capacity, helping them grow their membership, helping them achieve the relevant qualifications, supporting them with advice and guidance, and also supporting with their events as well. Alongside that, we're obviously trying to also remove barriers for people. So we know that, for example, cost is a barrier, and we've created a pathway for community groups to access our events at low or no cost wherever possible. So you know, £10 entry fee instead of a £50 entry fee makes a big difference. And then also looking at kind of consultation and co-production with communities. So, you know, we've created an inclusion advisory group where members of the community running sector are able to come together, help us using their lived experience, help us guide and shape the strategies to really ensure that we provide the best possible experiences for underrepresented groups and communities. And these advisory groups have really clear terms of reference. They have clear objectives, and, you know, crucially, members of those groups are paid as well. So we're very clear that for us, you know, in order to make a true difference in what we want to do, is we need to put those people at the heart of our planning and processes. And the last thing I'd say as well on this is you know, allyship is hugely important. So that word has come up a lot in recent years, and I think people are familiarizing themselves with that term, but we're very conscious that, you know, our events, for example, are a drop in the ocean in London in terms of the opportunities to get involved in physical activity. In reality, we know also that our events are not necessarily for everyone. So, you know, when we set up the London Marathon back in 1981, we didn't ask London whether it wanted the London Marathon. We understand that communities also want their own events that are organised by themselves and are races or spaces that they can genuinely feel welcome and feel represented, which is why we have set up a programme whereby we support community events which are not our own. So we support in a number of ways, whether that be providing our time pro bono to organise these events. A great example is a cycling event which we hosted for the last 2 years called the Black Unity Bike Ride, whereby we provide you know, the event organisation for a range of Black cycling collectives, you know, to deliver that event successfully. We also do other things such as providing equipment or logistical support to other community events. I think all of that is really enhancing the relationships that we're building with these communities to have stronger connections and build trust with them, which in turn helps us to engage them within our own events.
Wow, fantastic insights. Thanks, Hamid. Can we maybe just, there might be some people sitting on the call. We've obviously got a whole range of people, as I mentioned, 64 countries, from, you know, the pinnacle where you sit with a World Marathon major to some people that are kind of lower down the tier, so to speak. And some people might be sitting, okay, it's fine for London Marathon with their big budgets and the resources they got. Give us a sense of, you know, how do you start out for someone who, you know, there might be events here who haven't even started on this journey yet. How do they make it practical to break down those initial barriers of, I don't have the resources, I don't have the money to invest in it, and you know, many events might be looking and saying, well, a £10 entry versus a £50 entry, that's a bigger impact on my P&L for many events that are, you know, commercially challenged. Any insights around that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to look at this through the lens of what you're trying to do. If it's about inspiring activity, which for us it is, we have to find ways around, you know, budget constraints and so on. So I think there are a number of different ways in which you can do that. I don't think it necessarily costs a huge amount to, for example, consult with the relevant communities that we're talking about. So if you have the ability to communicate with them, whether that be through hosting, you know, drop-in sessions where you can go and meet local residents or local community organizations to understand what their barriers might be, to gain insights into what would make them want to engage in your events. How can you support them on their journey to the start line, if you will, through to, your communications and your marketing as well. So what can you do around your imagery and your, content that you're providing to potential participants to inspire them? So how are you reflecting the communities that your event is running through or passing through? I think, if you have a route that enters into specific communities, you should very much be able to, have conversations with those communities and understand and bring them on board in terms of gathering insights and understanding their lived experience as to how that can inform your strategy and your planning going forward. So I don't necessarily think it costs a huge amount. Yes, not everyone has a huge budget to, pay for someone to do that role specifically. But I think it's on all of us in this day and age to think about how, if we're going to embed inclusion across our organizations, where does the accountability lie? It lies with everyone. I think the top people at the top of your organization should very much have this at the heart of what they want to do, but also those at all levels within the organization can contribute something towards making the events more inclusive, even if it be doing some research or reading up on something or going and meeting specific groups or communities. I think there are a whole host of different ways in which you can do that. But it starts, I think, with organizations having the kind of the will and the desire to embed some of these things within what they're doing already. So it's about how can you incorporate that into your planning and processes that currently exist.
Great insights. Thank you, Hamid. And it brings me back to a Mass Participation World Conference. I think it was the year before last. Mike Nishi was involved in a panel on diversity and inclusion. And one comment that was made was, rather than being like a tourist that passed through an area one day of the year, be engaged on an ongoing basis. And, you can benefit so much, and it's mutual benefits, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you can do it, it doesn't have to be just participants. It's also about spectators. It's also about entertainment on the route. It's also about volunteers as well. So a whole host of different ways in which you can engage communities.
Yeah, and so often, as you've already pointed out, that multicultural nature of the communities that we go through, imagine the opportunity to show the music and the culture of showcase the music and the culture of those different communities along the route. Totally different experience for everyone involved. It doesn't have to be just about them getting involved in running in the event, does it?
Absolutely, completely agree.
Yeah. Hamid, we're pretty getting close to time. I'd love to get a sense, you guys have obviously been trailblazers to some degree at London Marathon event. What's your vision for the future? If you see what's happening in other parts of the world, in other parts of the UK, where do you see it going? And fast forward 5 years or 10 years, what would you like to see in the role that you're creating, both from a London Marathon events perspective and other events in our ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's so many things I'd like to see change, but I think being honest, I think personally what I'd like to see, I'd like to see more roles like mine and more teams across mass participation organizations and race organizers that work to deliver social impact. I think we need to give social impact the same level of importance as environmental sustainability. And I think that has rightly become a huge priority for organizations across the board, but it'd be great to see social impact and inclusion being part of that. Also given that status. I also think we need to probably stop looking at inclusion as a set of very distinct, separate characteristics and look at it through an intersectional lens. People aren't defined by one protected characteristic, the color of their skin or their, sexuality or whatever. We need to think of it in a much more holistic way, which I suppose is to mean that, we need to see more holistic approaches to how organizations are working better with communities, and they need to be more nuanced in how they do that. I think I'd also really would like to see, and I think my vision would be to see this gap between mass participation events and grassroots sport narrowing. I feel like there's a huge amount that we can learn from organizations that are at grassroots level who are day in, day out working with those communities and understand their needs and the barriers that they face. That we need to kind of, bring ourselves down to their level in the sense of kind of meet them and understand how we can learn from them and connect and build trust with those groups. And beyond that, I guess I'd like to see a sense of, a greater sense of giving back from mass participation events. So, how do we support communities and grassroots community sports groups to scale up what they're doing, and kind of help change the landscape of what we think of as maybe traditional athletics clubs? Because, where I come from in the UK, for example, they are very traditional. They are very kind of archaic in their ways. They don't engage, they're not innovative. They don't engage the audiences we're talking about. So how can perhaps there's scope to kind of think of these new community running crews and so on being the new version of what athletics clubs look like in the future, and really kind of driving this inclusion agenda forward, and also providing a kind of breeding ground for new talent as well, diverse talent that aren't currently being unearthed because of the fact that there are so many barriers. So I think mass participation, events have the scope to give back more to that, to kind of the more grassroots athletic side of things, which I don't think we do enough of.
Yeah, great insight. So that whole collaboration, giving back, engagement on an ongoing basis. Hamid, wonderful. There's a couple of comments in the chat that I'd love to read out. One from Alan Brooks I'm assuming that you're in Toronto. Alan, will you be at mile 21 on TCS London Marathon Race Day?
Yes. Mile 21, we have Rainbow Row, which is our LGBTQ activation. So we have a whole host of entertainment and community organizations represented there, and we'll be continuing to kind of develop that space over the next few years.
Wonderful, thank you. And then we've got just a couple of comments here. Rabi Nail saying thanks for the insight, Hamid. Francois Neem, very insightful, thank you, Hamid. And there's one further up, I think, from someone in Kigali. Great and bright ideas, Peter Herring from Kigali, thank you. Okay, well, just time to say thank you and farewell to Hamid Vaghefian. Thank you so much, Hamid. Great to see you again, and welcome back, Alessio and Michelle. Thanks, Hamid. Great to see you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll leave it to you, Alessio and Michelle.
Hello, it's been long overdue. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Alessio.
Instead of me jumping up and down, because I've been wanting to have this conversation on stage, so to speak, for a very, very long time. Michelle, as you and I have had conversations about not just how important, but also how potentially fun this part of the sport, this part of the industry is. And I'm just excited to be discussing here with you today the whys and the hows of integrating disability races in marathons, in big city races. Before we get into the technicalities, I would like you to take maybe a minute just to introduce yourself and explain how you came about doing this job. At which point exactly of the evolution of the industry and the sport have big organizations like London Marathon or World Marathon majors thought that maybe we need a position like yours? Can you help us understand that?
So, hi everybody, I'm really happy to be here with you all today. So my role at London Marathon didn't start off as head of disability. I started many years ago when I was asked, when I was working somewhere else, if I would be interested in taking on the mini wheelchair marathon. It's the last 3 kilometers or 2.6 kilometers of the London Marathon, and was given a brief of, can you develop this for us? And kind of like that's where my journey started. Fast forward 10 years, I got an invite to go to the London Marathon office, and was asked a very basic question of, what would you do if we had an elite wheelchair race? And I kind of like asked, what do you do for your elite runners? And I got told, we invite them, we fly them in, we give them a hotel, we give them prize money. And I said, I'd do exactly the same for elite wheelchairs. And I think that conversation arose after my then race director and CEO had been to New York, and a couple of the wheelchair athletes in New York cornered them and said, what are you doing in London? You're far behind New York. What are you going to do? And I think that was the evolution of where I started in my role, and started with this whole evolution of, elite wheelchair athletes. And from when I started, the one thing when I started was there was the World Marathon Majors. And I thought, well, why isn't there a World Marathon Majors for wheelchairs? And went along to different events in Boston, and then New York, then Chicago, Berlin, and kind of like saw, well, we can do something. And kept getting told that actually, you know, elite wheelchair racing is not at the level that runners are at, and we need to build a depth in field, and we need to have an opportunity to promote wheelchair racing. So I thought, okay, better start small and work big. So in 2012, my race director then sat down with the Boston race director, and I presented an idea of that London Marathon and Boston Marathon are always 6 days apart. And I said, why don't we do a Boston-London Marathon series where we get everyone to go to Boston, and then we fly them straight from Boston to London, and they do London. And what you have to understand with elite wheelchair athletes or para-athletes, they can do 1 week after another. Their recovery is far different to runners. And so we set up the Boston-London Challenge, where we offered additional prize money for the winner of the series.
This was in 2012.
This was in 2012. So our first year was 2013, because we discussed it in 2012. We sat down during the Olympics and had a conversation around it. And that's how we started. And I think from that, conversations were then developing around a sponsor for World Marathon Majors. And I suggested that this is a time where we got to really push to include the wheelchair series within the Abbott World Marathon Majors, when we knew that Abbott were going to be the sponsors. And they loved it. And that was the start of the journey of the Abbott World Marathon Majors, and a really competitive field of elite wheelchair, fields that we now get in these races.
Michelle, we will resume the interview, our conversation in a second, but first I would like to acknowledge the fact that Jack Fleming, director of the Boston Marathon, is here today. He just popped a comment in the chat box congratulating for the collaboration between these two races. I would like to stress that Jack has a little event coming up at the end of this weekend, so kudos to him for joining this. This shows how, you know, the big leaders in the sport really are leaders every day in every circumstance. Michelle, would you say that the great success of the London 2012 Paralympic Games was instrumental in getting us where we are today?
I think it was partly to do with that. I think London was a turning point. The London Paralympics was a turning point in terms of para sports across the world. I think the way that London presented it, the way the media grabbed it in Britain, in the UK, was exceptional. And I think that was a turning point. For me, I've been involved in disability sports for over 30 years. And for those of you who don't know me, my passion is swimming. I coached Paralympic swimmers, and I spent many, many years trying to break down barriers with swimming clubs to allow disabled swimmers to go and swim in swimming clubs, which when I first started, no one was willing to do that. So, 2012 definitely changed the landscape, and 2012, I think, really helped with elevating that actually wheelchair athletes, para-athletes are athletes first and foremost, and that they can break down barriers in the same way that runners or other athletes can break down barriers. They train as hard, they work as hard, they just, they are able to get out there and show the world that actually they are athletes. And I think if we see them as athletes, then we can break down many barriers. If we see them as disabled people, we're putting the barriers in their way.
Michelle, we will talk of the hows in a second, but before, I would like to understand the why. Let's assume that I'm a race organizer today with a big size race and with budget or the ability to stage a Paralympic race, a para-athletics event. Let's say a wheelchair competition, which is probably the most popular format right now. Why would I want to do that? How do you convince me to do that?
I think one of the big reasons to do that is it brings value to your event, brings value to your race. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's cheap. You have to look at your route. You have to make sure that your route is accessible. And when I say accessible, you don't need to cut up any, you don't have to change your route if it's accessible, that it's not on grass and it's not on, they will race on cobblestones, but it's really uncomfortable and difficult sometimes on the cobblestones. So you've got to look at, can you do a route where you take those bits out? Do you go over bridges that are made from wood? Is that easy for them to push the chair over? Do you have carpeted surfaces where that would almost stop the wheelchair when they're pushing? But I think, they bring a real value to your event. And when you think about, they bring excitement. I remember the very first event when I was in charge in London, right on the finish line, there were 7 men racing to the finish, and there was a crash 5 meters from the end. And that picture of that crash made front page of the Telegraph here in London. Mm-hmm. Never before had London Marathon had a picture on the front page of the Telegraph. So, it broke down barriers. It started people talking. And I think if you can be open enough to include elite para-athletes, and especially the wheelchair athletes, you're going to add value to your event.
And Michelle, who's most difficult to convince? The head of finance, or the technical race director?
I think both. I think because both, elite wheelchair athletes are elite athletes. And so you've got to be able to offer them prize money, and prize money that is not just a token gesture of, I'm going to give them $1,000. You've got to offer them prize money.
If you offer a token, if you were to offer a token prize money, it could almost fire back. It would be seen as tokenism, in fact. Yeah,
it's tokenism. So you've got to be serious about it and be able to offer them the same deal as what you would offer your runners, your elite runners. So I think that's hard. And I also think your race directors need to be open enough to engage. A bit like what Hamid said, is you've got to engage with the athletes. I don't profess to know everything. I'm not disabled. I don't use a wheelchair. But what I do is I speak to the athletes all the time. And by speaking to the athletes, you break down the barriers. By speaking to the athletes, you get to understand their needs, what they want, and they bring such value to your event. You've got race directors here from other races which have, include wheelchair races. Jack will be one of them. Mike Nishi's on this call. They will all say that, they bring value. They really have personalities. When you put them in front of a camera or in front of, a press conference, they can bring value. They talk very well. They make you think differently. They make you look at actually, what can we do better to be better ourselves? Mm-hmm. And I think that, I would say to everyone, challenge yourselves to engage with wheelchair athletes, with para athletes, to look at how you can include them in your events.
You mentioned prize money earlier. Can you give us some figure? How much money do these athletes make? How many athletes make a living from para marathoning? And how would that stack up against the able-bodied prize purse?
So, the prize funds are different. They're not the same. We are working hard to making equal prize pots. Some races already are offering equal course record money. So I know that there are quite a few races where they have $50,000 course record, and that's the same for everybody, whether you're a wheelchair athlete or a runner. Others are looking at just elevating their prize pot year on year and trying to bring it up so it's more equal. As I mentioned earlier in the discussion, wheelchair athletes go from event to event. They can run, event after event, and all the athletes are doing Boston Monday. Next Monday, they'll get on a flight on Tuesday to London, and they will be doing London on the Sunday. That does not mean it's right that they don't have the same equal prize money, but we need to work to that point. And I think, I definitely know that the marathon majors, their series points, their series prize pot is now equal between runners and the wheelchair athletes. So that's equal prize money. In London, we've year on year since 21 have upped our prize money, and we're getting closer to that equal prize pot. And it's really important that athletes see that you value them as elite athletes. And you can't start, when I started off with a budget. I think my prize fund was $10,000. And at the time, that was a lot of money for a lot of athletes. I'd never seen prize money of that. And I wasn't the biggest. New York was by far offering much more than that. I think now, we're all aware and know that we have to look at our prize money and make sure that we can elevate it so that they feel that they are, for them, it's a profession. This is how they make their money. This is how they earn their money. And it's really important that we do that.
And how many of them are there? What would you think worldwide? How many athletes are professionally racing wheelchairs?
So on my starting line at London Marathon, I will have 22 men and 18 women, and that's probably the biggest field I think assembled, invited field. There are lots of wheelchair athletes across the world. There are those that are just below that elite level. There are those that are developing into elite athletes. There are a lot of wheelchair athletes across the world. It's at what level you're willing to open up your race to. But in terms of what I'd call your top 20, top 30 even, there are a lot. What we don't have in our races, because they're not traveling at the moment, are the Chinese athletes. If you add them into the field, you're adding another 3 or 4. That would take it to 25. And then, we always see at the Paralympic Games a number of nations that traditionally don't send athletes to the wheelchair marathons, to the marathons that go on every year. But when they're on the start line at the Paralympics, they're there and they're winning medals. So I think, there are about 20 to 30, I would say, in the men's field and 18 to 25 in the women's field. And it's building, because when I first started, I couldn't even get 6 women to my race the first year. So, we've really developing, and I think the prize money has brought people into the sport where they would have retired from the track, they staying on and doing road racing.
Our time theoretically is up, but it will still take a few more minutes because I believe it's important to dissect some of the technicalities of staging a para race in conjunction with a marathon. Let's talk about the hotel choice. How do you, I know that the London Marathon, for instance, they've been moving to different hotels these past few years, and now they've landed on a different one. If you could choose a hotel to accommodate to the best of its availabilities a para race, what would this hotel have?
So from a hotel point of view, it's really important that you can offer accessible rooms, and accessible rooms are rooms that really meet the need of the athlete. There's no bath that they have to get into. There's showers that they can wheel in. There's facilities there that support the athlete rather than me. No hotel is ever going to have enough accessible rooms. But I think the way that hotels are being built now, and the way that we're looking at living how people live, most hotels are now adapting to having showers rather than baths and things like that. But for me, what's really important about the hotel we picked this year was we've never had a hotel that could offer us 18 accessible bedrooms, and that's what we've got this year. Now, we do know that some athletes don't spend all their time in a wheelchair. They can get out of their chair. So, for me, 18 accessible rooms is amazing. But those are the things you have to think of. You have to think of access. Is the room big enough for them to move around in with their wheelchair? Can they fit a racing chair into the room? There's no point giving them a bedroom that's tiny and then there's nowhere they can store their racing chair. I mean, at London, what we do is we offer storage for racing chairs, but we also allow them to take their chairs to their room. Those are some of the things we think about. We also think about where optimum training venue is, close to where the hotel is.
Interesting. What would it be, for instance? I have no idea.
Well, it depends where it is and depends where the hotel is. Sometimes there could be a park nearby and they could just go into the park and train. Sometimes you have to bus them or take them to where they can go and do training, where it's safe for them to do training. Because what we don't want is we don't want them going on the roads and then there being an accident and something happened to them. It's not like runners can get up in the morning, put their trainers on and run out from the hotel and find a route. The wheelchair athletes need to be aware of traffic and what's going on around them. So sometimes we have to bus them, or, in New York and Chicago, it's really wonderful because there's a park right nearby, the hotel, and they all just go out and train when they want to train. In London, we have to think about busing them to a venue and taking them there to train, and so that adds another element on top of everything else you're trying to organize.
Final two questions. One is on the value of the racing wheelchairs that these athletes use. How much are we talking about for the top end World Marathon Majors winners level?
The World Marathon Majors winners level, you're talking about chairs that cost anything from $15,000 to $50,000. So
more expensive than a competition road bike.
Much more expensive than a competition. And what's really, really interesting is that the evolution of wheelchair racing and the racing chairs is really changed, and it's a big talking point. You know, they're like racing bikes, really. A lot of time is spent on them. Marcel Hug, who's probably the top male athlete currently, you know, unbeaten in every race since 2021, is, you know, his chair was developed with him, alongside him, made bespoke for him. And the one thing about the racing chairs is you can't just go and try a racing chair. It's made to fit your size, your disability, and how you sit in a chair. So each chair has to be bespokely made for you. I think once the prototype is made, then the cost of the chair comes down, because then they've got your prototype, and the next time you order a chair, you know, they don't have to refit you and do a new prototype. So yeah, they're not cheap, but that's what the races are doing. And just to point out, I think, to everyone, just one thing is that the elite wheelchair athletes are still way behind in terms of gaining sponsorship. Many of them don't have sponsors. Many of them don't get sponsored by any of the big shoe companies or any of the major companies. There is a small proportion of those 36 athletes who get sponsorship, and sponsorship at a deal that sustains them if they didn't have race money.
Final question, Michelle. Like Kissinger said, who do I call if I want to call the EU? Who do I call if I want to call para-athletics? I'm a race organizer and I want to include these races. Is it World Athletics? Is it IPC? Is it who?
You could try IPC. IPC will tell you they can't release the names because of data protection. World Athletics, I don't think, has that detail yet. It's about knowing the people.
I confirm we don't, yeah.
It's about knowing the people in your areas who know the athletes, and trying to reach one person, trying to reach through a club, trying to reach through an organization, trying to find that one person who has the connections.
Okay. Can I pass your contact on to race organizers who may inquire? Am I authorized to do that? I will.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. We barely scratched the surface here. As Chris said in the introduction, we will do another inclusion webinar maybe in a few weeks' time, and we will make sure to discuss non-elite disability sport in marathons. Thanks, Michelle. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Alessio. Wonderful session, and that could have gone for an hour itself. As you've seen in the chat, or may not have seen in the chat, there's lots of questions. Michelle, if you've got some time, I'd love you. Hamid's been jumping in there and responding. The biggest problem for you is that Tracy Sunderland says his car costs less than a wheelchair, so he may be looking for a sponsor. Maybe you can help Tracy out. But yeah, love you if you've got a moment to jump in there, please. And I know it's a very busy time. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. But if you could spare a few minutes to go in there and answer some of those questions, it would be much appreciated. Little trivia, I met Michelle. I've heard about her for many, many years, and I met her for the first time in a preparation call 2 or 3 days ago. And as we started the call, I said, "Where are you from?" And it turns out that we're both from Zimbabwe. We have another reason to meet up in person one day in London or somewhere else. But Michelle, so wonderful to meet you on screen now, and look forward to meeting you in person. Thanks for those great insights, and again, thank you to Hamid for his insights as well.
Thank you, Chris. And yes, I'll answer those questions. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. So let's, after that wonderful and insightful session, let's move on to the next one, which, as I said at the top of the show, is a pre-recorded one. And this is a wonderful segment. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it yesterday. I had a conversation with Australian Paralympian Madison de Rozario. She couldn't be with us live, A, because it's late at night in Australia, in Sydney where she is now, and B, she's getting ready to jump on a plane to go to Boston and then on to London. So just sit back and enjoy this pre-recorded segment. It's about a 20-minute segment, and then I'll come back to you afterwards. The privilege and the responsibility. Madison de Rozario.
Hi, Madison. Great to see you. Thanks for making the time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, look, really excited to have this opportunity to chat. And before we started recording, we were talking about this amazing opportunity that the events have to be able to create an impact in their communities, to create accessible spaces. Talk to us a little bit about your experience in there, maybe even a little bit of your journey of what's brought you here and how important that ability to create accessible spaces and a pathway for people to become athletes on the stage with able-bodied athletes.
Yeah, look, I think sport is one of those things. It's one of our most pervasive industries, and the impact that it does have is absolutely enormous. And so I think sport needs to be a mirror to society and to the communities in which they exist. And so having that authentic representation of the people that make up our community in that sporting space is so important. And I believe that sport for people with disabilities is one of the most important things in our lives. And the reason for that is because we lose so much autonomy through different avenues. I think growing up with a disability through the medical system, decisions are very much made for you. And then on a more social level, I think the way we view disability carries quite a lot of negative stigma to it. And so sport is one of those few spaces where it forced you to almost like regain that autonomy and regain that control of your life and your narrative, which is often taken away from people with disabilities and specifically from girls with disabilities. I think that intersect is a very tricky one to manage. And so in terms of regaining that, control over your body and the respect that you have to have for your physical self through sport, it's hard to find that, I think, through other avenues. And so sport is so important for every single person, but I think there's this very important space for it, at least at some point in your life, for every person with a disability, and whether that goes to a high performance level to all the way to the Paralympic Games, whether it's grassroots community, wherever that exists, I think it's one of the most incredible things that you can do for yourself as a person with a disability. And so creating accessible spaces in sport is so important for race directors and for organizations and for sports to create that space is paramount.
Thanks. And so for the uninitiated, how would you define an accessible space? What are some of the obstacles that need to be overcome to create that?
I think when we think of accessible spaces when it comes to disability, we often think about the environmental aspect. So, accessible, hotels and the actual course for a marathon is one that you can complete, in a race chair and all those things. But I think the more important one is the social model of disability and how we view that, and creating not just a physically accessible space, but an inviting space. So a space where everyone feels like they genuinely belong and they're wanted in that. And I think that's one of the trickier things to navigate is sport. I think for so long it's definitely been a bit of a boys club, and it's moving away from that, but it still kind of carries that residual energy. But it's also a very non-disabled space. And so I think, having I think the marathons do such a good job of it, because you look at any footage of the majors and you see wheelchair races in that. And so I think some kid in the chair is going to see that and think marathons are for me as well. And that that wasn't the case when I was growing up, in a wheelchair. I didn't see that as much as we do now. And so I think that social change is what creates the biggest impact. You'll have so many more individuals like turning up at your door and knocking and asking to be a part of it because they see themselves represented in those spaces. And so I think creating a space that's inviting is huge.
So you mentioned yourself that those opportunities weren't necessarily there for you. Tell us a little bit about how your journey, how you ended up being an elite wheelchair racer.
So I grew up with two sisters. I'm in the middle, and we're all within 3 years. So we're all very, very similar in age. And I grew up playing sport with them, and they both were very good netball players and soccer or football players, which are two of arguably the worst sports for a girl in a wheelchair to try and play. But I just remember being the world's worst goalkeeper out there on the soccer pitch, hoping that they would do like a good enough job out there that I would never have to see the ball. And thankfully they were good enough, and it was so much fun because I was just doing, what my sisters are doing, and I loved it. And when I was about 12, though, I think you start to really see the differences. Like everyone's getting like taller and bigger and stronger, and you're kind of getting a bit left behind. And that's when I started exploring wheelchair sports options. And where I grew up, the city I grew up in, our wheelchair basketball program was centralized out there. And so that was like the first sport that I tried. And I was shocking. I was so bad at it. I'm so uncoordinated. And I remember trying it for like the third or the fourth time. And the man that coached it pulled me aside and told me, you're not really an asset to this team. Can I please get you to try another sport? And he had a race chair in the storage room. And so I jumped in that in like the parking lot of this basketball stadium and just absolutely fell in love with it. And this chair was way too big for me. I had all this foam in it to try and keep me in the middle. But I remember just loving it so much. And after that, it kind of all went pretty quick. I was about 11 when I first tried that and fell in love with it. And by 14, I made our national team as a part of the relay. So it happened quite quick.
Well, amazing story. And I guess that opportunity there where that experience could have been destroying or uplifting as it was, to be pulled aside and told you're not an asset to this team as you termed it. So maybe speak about that in terms of, the race directors that are listening here that aspire, maybe if they don't have a wheelchair category, to engage with the community, to bring young kids on that journey. How much advice could you give there, or what advice could you give in terms of, who do they engage within the community to make that happen? How then possibly do they involve with elite athletes like yourself to bring them in that community to create these role models?
I think it's anyone with lived experience is going to have so much to offer in this space. And I think not necessarily athletes. I think you bring in any person in a wheelchair to like, how do you create this? They're going to have so much input in that space. And any of your wheelchair sports organizations, your local kind of community organizations will have individuals with lived experience. And one of my favorite things about the Paralympic community and the Paralympic family is every single one of us, I think, is so willing to volunteer our time to leave this sport better than it was when we found it. And so I think every single one of us volunteers at grassroots things and will provide any kind of input, consult on any event to make it more accessible. And so I think it's just recognizing that you don't have all the information and you don't know what you don't know, and that's perfectly fine. And just finding the right people to talk to. And that's just anyone who has the lived experience is going to have so much to offer.
And I guess, thanks for that. I guess it varies a lot across the world, doesn't it? I mean, you've obviously had the opportunity to travel in a country like Australia as well, where, there is a significant amount of engagement with disabled athletes, to other countries where it's not so easy. I mean, I guess the sense is that in pretty much any city, there'd be a disabled group that you'd be able to find. Is that your experience? I mean, where do people, like, if there's someone we've got people here from Africa and South America and Asia, it's really just kind of going to the internet and finding disabled organizations and potentially partnering with them.
Absolutely. And there will be some, local, but if there isn't, or you don't know where to find them, I think we've all also advised, outside of our own country, our own city as well. Like I've definitely advised some other events that have nothing to do with Australia and communities here. And I think, and that's perfectly fine. It's not as good. I think you do need both the physical disability experience, but the cultural experience as well to personalize it for the event that you're running. As the closer to home you can find people, the better. But I think any one of us is willing to, I think the Paralympic movement it's a global movement. And so I think anyone from anywhere, whatever we can do to help to grow that, like we will all volunteer our time for and help to kind of build the sport. So again, reach out as locally as you possibly can. I think there's huge value in that. That doesn't work out for whatever reason, I think, expand that further away is totally fine.
And you spoke before we came on air about recently you were invited to be part of an event and you felt that it was more like a window dressing and they really didn't understand what they were doing. They hadn't reached out to advisors like yourself. Share a little bit. I mean, I'm not expecting you to name and shame, but give us some ideas of what was missing in that situation. Again, for these race directors that are listening, how are what are the key elements, having athletes with a disability on the board, advisoring, whether that's in a formal capacity or informally. Just some tips there for the race directors that are listening, please.
So yeah, the race that we were talking about earlier, I was asked kind of towards the end of their putting the event together to come on board as an ambassador. And I sort of assumed that meant that the race was one that a wheelchair racer could compete and complete. And it turns out it wasn't. There were parts of the course that were gravel. It was a point-to-point race, and they had no kind of transport in place to then bring day chairs from the start line to the finish line. And there was this almost expectation that anyone competing in this race in a wheelchair would have some kind of support system around them, either a parent or a carer or someone who was able to then kind of transport their day chair to the finish line for them. And I don't live in a city with my family or anything like that, and I would never assume to come up to a race with someone who could help me do very basic things that are under the jurisdiction of the event. But that was kind of the assumption, and I asked the question of how was your non-disabled runners getting back to their stuff to whatever they had. And the answer was buses. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, is that not an option as well? But I was like, oh, but none of them are accessible. Like, there was nothing in place for any wheelchair race to actually complete the race. Maybe you could physically do it. I wouldn't recommend it again because of the road surface wasn't appropriate and a few other factors. But that's quite a common thing that does happen, is the race isn't put together with consultation of anybody with lived experience. And then towards the end, almost in order to validate the event, they bring on an ambassador or somebody who kind of like ticks that box and say, we have an accessible event, and you just don't. And so I think having someone throughout that entire process to consult with is essential. You're not going to be able to put together an accessible race if you don't consult with someone who knows what that actually looks like. And that's something that we see happen quite a lot. I'm assuming globally it definitely happens in a lot of road races and track races in Australia. And you can tell the ones that have lived experience in their organising committees, and they're completely different events. And so I think the difference is day and night. And so don't just consult, but have the right people in the room for the entire process, I think is the key to making a genuinely accessible event.
Great. And let's go back again to then this kind of journey of bringing in it might be a school kid or even somebody at an older age who, like you, maybe had that opportunity to try out in the wheelchair from that coach who did the right thing. Tell us a little bit about that journey, how race directors can help. And you see many races have training programs and training groups and and more often than not, I'm sure they're focused at able-bodied athletes. How can those organizations involved in bringing people on that journey and making it feel welcoming, as you said?
Again, I think it's like having someone with lived experience in the space within your organization is absolutely paramount, because I think, so many of us with disabilities will shy away from spaces where we don't feel very welcome. And so, I love coming to race the marathon majors because I know they're welcoming, and every time I see them, I see people that, look like me on screens. If you see, anything to do with like London Marathon, New York City Marathon, you see wheelchair races in all the promo clips, in absolutely every, you land in the city and there's banners of people that, look like me. And I remember going to my first major, and it was London actually. And it was one of the first times that I'd seen an enormous event like that was an integrated event with non-disabled athletes as well, where I was seeing, wheelchair races and my sport kind of put, on that same platform. And that's what it's so incredibly welcoming. And every part of that design is done so specifically to create that space. And sport is so important for every single human. And I think, we see things, we know the impact that high performance sport has on communities, and not just community sport, but community. And so I think the Paralympics is the biggest platform for people with disabilities. And I feel like the marathon series is a very, very close second in the sporting world. And I was talking to Manuela, one of the women that I race with, and in Switzerland, the marathons are bigger than the Paralympics. They haven't quite got to the point where the Paralympics is as huge as the Olympics. And so the marathons kind of have this enormous responsibility to create a platform for people with disabilities to then have an impact on community. And so sport and Paralympic sport and disability sport has an impact on the 15% of people globally living with a disability. And so I think to create like an authentic representation of what that identity looks like in a positive, through a sporting lens, it kind of strips the disabled identity and the stigma away from that, because we're now focused on sport. And I think we all have such understanding what that looks like, what that means, that we're forced to see people in all of their facets and all of their identity. And we see these people with physical disabilities in the same light we're seeing that same person with incredible sporting prowess. And those are, to so many of us, are very conflicting identities. And that forces us then to see like the real humanity in people. And so I think to create platforms for athletes with disability isn't just creating opportunities for athletes, which is incredible. And I benefit from that. So obviously I love that. But it means that the next kid with a disability who never wants to participate in sport in their life, which is 100% fine, sees someone that looks like them just doing anything and everything that they want and being portrayed in this positive, strong, powerful light that we see athletes in. And that creates so many opportunities, and not just for that kid, but the environment that they're growing up in. The 85% of the world that doesn't have a disability is also beginning to believe that and embody that and believe in pathways for this child as well. And so the impact sport has is so massive, and therefore I think athletics and road racing specifically, what that kind of adds to that dynamic is very impactful. And I think that means there's responsibility for events and race directors and organizers to create an environment that allows that very natural progression to happen. But we need allies in this space. As a person with a disability, we need the race directors to invite us into these events, so then we can then have the impact that we can't otherwise have. And so it's we all rely so heavily on each other in that kind of ecosystem. And so it's, having allies in those roles that allow us to use those platforms is the best we could possibly ask for.
Yeah, and so inspiring for those young kids and the people. And I mean, I remember when the Paralympics was on in Sydney, I mean, there was just such an amazing buzz, and so many school kids particularly that must have been put on a different trajectory, able-bodied and disabled, as you're saying, that impact that it can make on a community. You spoke about London as your experience, and I'm guessing that there might be some people that are on the call that are running smaller events are saying, okay, that's London, they've got mega budgets, they've got Abbott, they've got all, the TCS and the like. Talk to us maybe a little bit about some events. You've obviously been to many events, and events that might not be on that scale, but some of the experiences that you've had and the impact that you've seen made on the community. Is there a particular one that stands out that you can share as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So like in Australia, almost every one of our cities will have like a city to surf kind of a race, or a city to base of equivalent, and they're anywhere from 10 to 14 Ks. They're obviously much smaller than the marathons are, and not have like a 5K, a 3K, just an array of different events. And I think creating a space in that for every single person is, because that's where you're going to get the majority of your community. We're not talking elite athletes at this point, it is everybody, but it's having roads that are ones that wheelchair racing comfortably do, having the waves to the start that allows a wheelchair racer to safely participate in that race is so important. So little things like having your wheelchair racing wave go off a minute before your runners, and if that wave doesn't happen, it's too dangerous for us to race. Like, you can say, yeah, you're welcome to do it, but we're going to be the ones in a position where it is too dangerous for we're so low, it's the dynamic doesn't work. But give us a minute's head start, and it's 100% fine. Like, you won't see us for the whole race, but we're still on the same roads with the same spectators having the same experience. And so that, something as simple as that, makes it so accessible. And I think just again consulting with people during the process of putting your event together is all those solutions are going to be presented to you almost naturally, because they're our lived experience. And I think creating an event, no matter what scale it is, that is both environmentally and socially accessible, they're absolute game changers on any scale, on that international stage, but as well as your community, your fun runs, all that kind of stuff. That access goes all the way through.
Wonderful, Madison. We're pretty much out of time. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
I just think that there's we can all have so much impact, and I think I often say that I could speak to a room of like 1,000 people, and it won't have the same impact as those 1,000 people then talking to their family, then talking to their neighbors, because that's where change happens. It's that community level. And so I think to this, virtual room of people right now, you guys are making your events just a little bit more accessible, the impact you are going to have is enormous. And you have the both the privilege and the responsibility to be able to do that. So I hope, you know, everyone grabs onto that with both hands, because, you know, sport surely should be for everyone, and there's so much space to make that true.
The privilege and the responsibility. That's a great way to end. Thanks so much, Madison. Thanks for making the time. You're going to be on a plane soon yourself. You're off racing.
Heading to Boston soon, yes.
Yeah, so Boston on Monday. All the very best for that. Thank you for making this time. I'm sure it's a busy preparation period, and all the best in Boston.
Thank you so much.
Huge thank you there to Madison de Rozario. What a wonderful, insightful chat. I really thoroughly enjoyed it myself, and I'm sure there's many great insights that those of you that are listening would have got out of that. As we move on to our next session, and we welcome someone to the show who's been with us a number of times. He's Paolo Emilio Adami, MD, PhD, Medical Manager, Health and Science Department of World Athletics. And Paolo's going to come and give us an update on new eligibility regulations for athletes who are transgender or have differences of sexual development, DST. Paolo, wonderful to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here today with all of you.
Great stuff. So I'm going to disappear. You've got screen sharing, so you should be able to bring your short deck up. And if you've got questions along the way to the audience, please type them in. It's just a very short segment, but we'll try our best to respond to those. And Paolo, as I said in my intro, he's committed that if he's not able to answer them all in the show live, he'll come back to you afterwards. Over to you, Paolo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is just an update of the recent World Athletics Council decision that had been come into effect on the 31st of March, so 2 weeks ago, and that do involve athletes with differences of sexual development and also transgender athletes. So first, let me clarify that this rule apply to world ranking competitions and for the ratification of world records. So this does not apply to, let's say, fun races or mass events that do not have that elite component, or that where a world record is not going to be broken. So it's a very particular category of athletes and a very small number of events that are affected by these regulations. So the main changes regarding DSD athletes, how they're called technically. So the proposed amendments is that for the female classification is that will require that all these athletes called DSD athletes to reduce testosterone levels below a limit of 2.5 nanomole per liter for a minimum of 24 months to be able to compete in the female category in any event, not just the events that were restricted previously from the 400 meters to the mile, including the mile. The difference with the previous regulation is that threshold was set at 5 nanomole per liter, and the duration was for 12 months. Based on the research and evidences that have been collected in this year's the council decided that restriction was not enough, so that the level of testosterone was lowered, and also the duration of the period to prove that the level is below the threshold has been prolonged to 24 months. There is an addition to this, is those athletes that were competing in non-restricted events, meaning lower than 400 meters or above the mile. These athletes will have 6 months as an interim period to comply with the rules. So they need to prove that for 6 months they have been having this level of testosterone below the 2.5 nanomole per liter. Regarding transgender athletes, the change that has been made will exclude male to female transgender athletes who have been through male puberty from female world ranking competition, again from 31st of March this year. So all those male to female transgender athletes that have been through a male puberty, they will be excluded from the female category. They can still compete in open categories, in dedicated categories if the event organizers allows that and sets that, but not in the female category. The third point, very important, is that with these two changes, there's also been the commitment of World Athletics to form a working group that will consult with both transgender athletes and the trans community in a wider perspective on issues that will arise from the implementation of these rules. So the objective is, again, to involve those that are directly affected by these rules and regulations and bring on carry on the conversation with them, ensuring that everyone is represented, everyone's voice is heard. Again, these rules apply only to, let's say, the highest level of events and for the ratification of world records. In any case, as a Health and Science Department of World Athletics, we're very happy to answer any question that might arise out of this. And I believe that there might be some question from a organizer's perspective. You're more than welcome to reach out to us at this email address, and we will be happy to answer this question. Again, as I was saying, from a let's say event organizer perspective, what would you be expected to do? It's actually not much, because let's say the management of these athletes or of these cases is done on a one-by-one case and individually with the athlete, so to preserve and ensure their confidentiality and their privacy. So nobody except the athlete and the Health and Science Department will know about this, and the athletes who have been let's say who are complying with the rules have eligibility certificate that saying that they're eligible to compete in the female category. So that's what what, let's say, from an event organizer perspective, you need to know. You're not expected to be in any case involved in the process at any level, but the athletes and or their, let's say, representative or the Health and Science Department of World Athletics is involved in this. Very brief presentation. I'm happy to take any question there might be, or again, feel free to reach out to us by email or also at the email address that Alessio has shared in the chat box, medical.confidential@worldathletics.org. We will be happy to address any question there might be on that side.
Thank you, Paolo. We have one question, Mikey, if you wouldn't mind just bring it up on the screen for me there. It's from Fanny Smith. And Fanny's saying, how does the WA regulations affect WPA sanctioned events? Are they exactly the same, only affecting athletes competing in world ranking or world record seeking athletes? WPA sanctioned events can be a little different.
So this is a very good question. These rules affect only World Athletics event. As I mentioned, the world ranking competition, and by that we mean the World Championship, of course, the Olympic Games, but also those national events that will then provide access to the international field of competition. What other international organization, for example, WPA, but to give you another example, World Master Athletes or other will do, it's I mean, it's up to them. They're not obliged, of course, to follow World Athletics regulations. In our experience, most of the times, to be honest, they do follow this regulation, but then the implementation, for me, it's hard to speculate at this moment because it would be up to these other organizations to develop. I can tell you that, for example, for the athletes that we're directly looking after, we deal with them directly on a one-to-one basis. We support them. We provide them also a financial support to have all the let's say the medical care or assessment, whatever they need. In any case, we will support them. But what do other organizations do? That's I cannot speculate on that at the moment.
Thank you, Paolo. We have one there from Stephen Kasi. Instead of banning them or expecting them to take drugs, why don't we look at creating their own categories with World Athletics?
That's a good point, and actually this is something that we have also been discussing, and it's part of the objectives of that working group that I mentioned. I mean, the purpose of that working group is indeed it's to look for alternative solution that would ensure everyone can participate in the sport. If we are going to create just a third category exclusive for them, that could be seen probably stigmatizing in another way, right? So that's probably not the best solution. But again, this is one of the objectives that the working group has, going through all possible solutions.
Yeah, complex topic, and yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Paolo. I think that's the last question we have. Just a reminder again, Alessio has put your email in the chat, so if anybody feels that they need some more follow-up or a question that they'd like to ask afterwards, just down a little bit more. Thanks, Mikey. medical.confidential@worldathletics.org. So as Paolo mentioned, totally confidential on behalf of the athlete and World Athletics. Please feel free to reach out to them through that. Paolo, just quick scan down, no more, just a farewell from Jack. All the very best, Jack. Have a wonderful event on Monday. Thank you, Paolo, for joining us again. Great to see you as always, and enjoy the rest of your day there in Monaco, which is where I assume you are.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Very nice seeing you. Bye.
Wonderful. Bye-bye. So we move on to our next segment, and I'm going to be joined by Michelle Sammet, who's the Stakeholder Communications Manager for World Athletics. Hello, Michelle. Welcome.
Hi, Chris.
Wonderful to see you. And Nadia, who's the Communications and PR Manager for SCC Events. And many of you would recognize them as the organizers of the BMW Berlin Marathon. Hi, Nadia. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, and thank you for inviting us.
Wonderful to see you both. And obviously within this wider subject of inclusion is that one of gender equity. And this one we're going to be, I guess, focusing on motherhood and marathons as the topic that we've given it. And we're going to look at exploring how road racing can further embrace equity through policy changes and practical implementations. And maybe starting, if I can, with you, Michelle, and I'm going to join the conversation for the first little bit, and then I'm going to step away and leave you to have a conversation between the two of you. But World Athletics are driving the annual International Women's Day campaign, #WeGrowAthletics. Can you tell us a little bit about the main reasons for the initiative and what it entails, and I guess particularly why it's relevant to people on this call?
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks so much for having us on this. We started We Grow Athletics back in 2021 to coincide with International Women's Day. And it was really a campaign to look at, okay, how can we grow the sport by also embracing equity? And that was recognizing some of the steps that we as an organization, as World Athletics, still had to take, but also we as a wider sport had to take. So starting with the launch in 2021, World Athletics made a series of concrete pledges to commit to further grow the role that girls and women play in the sport. And that included things like changing the leadership situation and making sure that our council by the end of 2027 is gender equal, looking at traditions in the sport that have always been the same, but for no other reason than it's always been done the same way, in ending the World Championships always on a men's event. That changed last year at the World Championships, changing the default on the website of all the top lists to default to women's events, when previously for decades it had always been defaulting to men's events. So it was quite close to home that we did an initial review. And then with every year that progressed, we also looked at, okay, how can we expand that? And how can we actually work closer with our stakeholders in making sure that everyone within their area of expertise plays their part in moving towards gender equity? And that included our partners, that included our events, that included the agencies that we work with. And every year, again, ahead of International Women's Day, we take stock, we look at what has been achieved going into the previous year, and then making further pledges to move towards gender equity. And as we were going through the process this year of reviewing ahead of the 8th of March, where we were at after the last 2 years of campaign, we realized we haven't actually got that much data on mass participation and where we are on the road running space. And we know that that's a big space where thousands and hundreds of thousands of women a year participate in. We don't actually have that much data. But then as we were doing the research, we actually saw some great examples of road races out there that are doing great things in that space. And that's where we thought actually bringing this together, maybe this will spark some ideas amongst other organizers that come the time next year, International Women's Day, we've got a lot of positive things to look back on.
That's wonderful. So I guess if I'm hearing you, you're kind of saying that, you know, to create fair access and equal experiences, there's some current disadvantages that you need to overcome. Talk to us a little bit more about that, please.
Absolutely, because if we look at our sport on the just field of play, if we're looking at road racing in particular, women and men tend to race the same distances. There is the same entry fees for women and men. We tend to have the same prize money on the elite side of things. So looking at it, there is equality, but actually equity doesn't equal equality. So no, equality doesn't equal equity. And what we're trying to do is really make everyone understand that sometimes you have to put certain aspects in space that both men and women participating in the events have the same positive race experience, but sometimes you might have to give everyone a bit of a helping hand. And as I said, one prime example, one of the subjects that we're looking at here is motherhood and is pregnancy, and what happens if you're training for a big race and suddenly you get pregnant. Where does that leave you with your entry fee? What happens if you have had a child, you're going back into running, you're trying to run a race, but you're still nursing? What are the implementations there? And that's where I'd like to bring Nadia into the conversation, because Nadia, you amongst several other big races last year, actually at the BMW Berlin Marathon introduced a dedicated pregnancy deferral policy. So would you be able to just tell the group what was the thinking behind it and what exactly does that policy actually entail?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I'm very happy to share some information or details on our new pregnancy deferral policy. Actually, we implemented it during the last year by the end of 2022. And we offer the opportunity for pregnant women to defer their starting spot within 3 years. So, for example, if a woman successfully registered for a race in this year for 2023, she can notify us that she became pregnant, and then we give her the opportunity to postpone her start for the next year, for 2024, 25, or 26.
And I guess part of that, when we talked about this and you introduced the idea to me, you said, actually, we've always had something in place that would allow women to defer their spot, but they would have to proactively go and seek us out, contact us, and then we would on a case-by-case basis do that. Whereas last year was actually the point where you decided to kind of proactively put that policy on your website to showcase from the outset, this is a possibility. And what has the reception for that been like from your end?
Yes, exactly. Maybe let me start from the beginning, how it all developed. So we received already during the last years a lot of requests and demands for the need from pregnant women that they want to transfer the spot, want to postpone it. And then we had something like a goodwill policy. So when they notified us, we offered them the opportunity to get a little bit of the starting fee back, but we didn't offer them the opportunity to postpone it fully to the next years. So, and we received more and more requests and the feedback from the community that it's about time. And additionally, we enjoy very strong ties with our Abbott World Marathon majors, with the fellow marathons, and they experienced the same requests and needs from the community. So we have very strong communication tools, and we shared our experiences, and we figured out that there's the need to finally put on a policy to guarantee pregnant women to postpone their starting spot, and to enable more opportunities and facilities for women and breastfeeding women. So it was like a journey, and we started this journey. So the policy is only the starting point for us. we are going to continue this journey, and we know we have a lot of work ahead of us and a lot of work to do. So we are happy to share the journey we are at right now and to continue together. So yeah, that's kind of the little history, and the reception of the policy was really overwhelming. It was only positive. So we received a lot of positive feedback via social media, especially. Journalists reached out to us, and so many women contacted us and wrote, thank you so much. This helps us a lot, and representation matters. Mothers must be seen in the world of long distance running. And so it was really only positive, the feedback.
That's really great to hear. We were actually hoping to have Erica Edwards-O'Neill from New York Roadrunners with us, but she couldn't make it. But we had a conversation with her beforehand, and she kind of echoed a lot of what you're saying there about being inclusive, showcasing mothers, that they have a spot in the racing. But one of the really interesting things that she mentioned, and it kind of echoes in what you're saying there, is that whatever policy you introduce or whatever implementation of measures to support mums you introduce, it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% ready. You can start something as a pilot. You can go back to your stakeholders, ask them for feedback, and then review, revise, and repeat what it is that you're doing. What would you say are some of the learnings that you have taken away from implementing the policy now, last year at the BMW Berlin Marathon and last week at the Berlin Half, but also some of the other measures that you have taken to be more inclusive of mothers in your races?
Yes, I can confirm what my colleague said. It really doesn't need to be 100% fixed, or we don't know yet how the journey will go on and what's next. Of course, we have plans, and but I think it's crucial to start. And the most important feedback is the feedback of those who are directly affected or who are benefiting from the news or the policy. So our next steps will be, you mentioned our Berlin Half Marathon. It took place 1.5 weeks ago. And we also implemented the policy to all our races, so also the half marathon. And from more than 36,000 participants, 11 women used the policy. So it was the first number we have then that I can share. So we are going to monitor the number, of course, and hope pregnant women will use it. And the next step is we are trying to introduce nursing stations or the possibility or the facilities for women in the starting and finish area of our Berlin Marathon. And we already have nursing station at our expos for the Berlin Marathon and the half marathon.
Now, you are in a communication and in a marketing role, and we heard earlier how important it is to also communicate these things, but also the value it brings in actually bringing new communities to your event, raising overall the interest in the event from people that normally wouldn't have necessarily engaged with it or that would have been underserved. Where do you see the potential in making the event more accessible to mothers?
Yes. Actually, we strongly believe that visibility and representation matters. So also in our communication and marketing campaigns, we focus on representing women and in the future as well, mothers. So we believe that this really can change something. And additionally, we are trying to improve the facilities and the accommodations. And of course, a key learning that we had from last year was that it's really important to communicate the news or the policies, even when there are only small milestones or just little improvements. It's really necessary to communicate it so that those persons or those women who can benefit from it, that they know it, and that the broad or all participants know about it, that there is this opportunity. It was really actually, it's nothing new, but it was a key learning again, that it's really important, even it's a small change, to communicate it and make it accessible, so for more people.
But at the same time, you actually had quite a positive experience with having other people also communicate on your behalf that were experiencing, for the first time, the fact that you had nursing stations at the expo, and actually having people that normally otherwise maybe would be paid as influencers speaking on behalf and praising actually the effort that you put in. And it was probably far more authentic than if you would have kind of done something big on that kind of initial pilot that you launched last week, correct?
Yeah, actually, social media is sometimes faster. So there was an Instagram page that reached out to us and asked about our current policy. And it was really new to that time. And we communicated it. And then she was faster with it than us with the communication, but it was fine. So she received a lot of positive feedback. We received a lot of positive feedback. And as you said, yeah, it's a good news that spread.
And as you said, there was a lot of collaboration with other World Marathon majors, where we've also seen Boston, London, New York, all having policies in place. And again, I spoke to Erica because last year the TCS New York City Marathon had partnered with an organization called &Mother, and they actually had lactation stations along the course. So they also allowed nursing mothers to actually go pump as they were running the course. And make sure that was also something that's supported. And one of the things that she mentioned, and I think it's also something that you have experience with, is that oftentimes policies that you roll out for the mass participation runners can actually initially be trialed with your own staff, because they're often quite as impacted as the runners themselves. I mean, if you have mothers, if you have family members participating in events like that, they still need to be given the opportunity to do their job while also not having to compromise on family life. What's your experience at SEC events in that regard?
Yeah, actually, it's a super interesting topic. And during the discussions on the policy last year, we also thought about how can we support the mothers and fathers in our staff to help them balance their working life and family life better. So we started a coaching program for young parents, so not only for mothers, but also for fathers. And we have individual and group coachings. And as we already started, we don't know where it's going to lead, but we already noticed positive changes. Even the reception in the whole staff is very positive. And our goal is not only better surroundings or understanding for the parents or the mothers and fathers who are enjoying the coaching, but also within the whole company, and to also implement long-term accommodations or facilities to help mothers and fathers work more relaxed and to get both under one hat.
Thanks so much. There is a question in the chat, but it is on the New York City Marathon. So I actually can't answer that question specifically. It was how busy were the on-course pumping stations at the New York City Marathon last year? I will collect the questions and I'll pass them on to Erica, unless there's someone. I saw that there were a few people from New York actually on the call as well, but we'll try and find that out. But if you could, in a dream world, if you see where you are right now, having just implemented the policy, what would be your main recommendation for race organizers who are currently reviewing what it is that they're doing, how accommodating their event is? What would be the first steps in actually drafting something up or reviewing what can be done to support mothers specifically in the running sphere?
Yes, I think the first step is to communicate with the participants, to be in direct contact with them. So that's what we learned. We communicate with them on our events via email and on social media. And it's so important to receive the direct feedback and to understand their needs. And then additionally, what really helps us to improve is the contact to other event organizers. So it's really helpful to talk with each other, to share opinions and experiences. And maybe the last thing I would mention is maybe just start. It's the best option to do. So we are not perfect right now where we are. We have a long road ahead and we want to improve, and we are improving. So we are going step by step. And I think it's the best way to do it. Just, start.
Absolutely. There is a question in the Q&A. Does the Berlin Marathon offer deferrals to other groups as well? And if not, is there any negative response from others that are seeking to defer, that are not given the opportunity, for example, illness or injury or something like that?
Yes, we already had it before, the pregnancy deferral policy. We have a policy or the option when participants notify us that they are seriously ill or have an injury, that they can postpone their starting spot to the next year and that they receive parts of their registration fee. And additionally, when they get ill in advance directly of the event, they can visit at our medicine or our medical staff at the expo, and they can confirm the illness as well.
That's really, really useful. Thanks so much. And again, as you said, you initially also always had a policy in place and then just decided to actually segment it to allow for the different types. We're running out of time here on this segment, but I think lots of really interesting thing in there. I guess just to wrap up, what I really wanted to say to everyone here is that, as I said, we were actually lacking the data. And the more we're having conversations with race organizers, the more we're learning about the different policies and the different ideas that organizers have in place. So this is actually more of a call to action from me to you all, that anything that you are already doing or that maybe on the back of this meeting that you are planning to do specifically with an eye on gender equity, if you could let either Alessio or myself know, I'll put my email in the chat as well, because as we're collating all of these great initiatives, that's then something that, again, we can shine a light on for next year's International Women's Day, and really, again, use great examples from the industry already to hopefully make the sport more accessible and kind of drive that gender equity. And that's really what this was about. And thanks so much, Nadia, for sharing your experiences.
Thank you too.
Thanks so much, Michelle and Nadia. Lots of great insights there. And there's a common thread that's been going all the way through tonight, isn't it? It's collaboration, and it doesn't have to be perfect to start with. I guess two common threads there, but really this collaboration, we can all learn from each other and support each other. Thank you to both of you. Enjoy the rest of your days, and great to have you joining us. As we move closer to the finish line, we've got a couple of sessions to go. This next one really exciting for me in my backyard. I live in Bali, for those of you that don't know, and delighted to be joined from Jakarta by Riena Tambunan, who's the founder of PT Dunia Olah Raga. Riena, are you joining us there? I think we're just going to bring Riena's camera up. There you are. Nice to see you, Riena.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me tonight.
Great, thank you for joining us. Riena is also the race director of the Jakarta Marathon, and very soon going to be jumping on a plane and heading over to Boston. Riena has just got this absolute thirst for learning and knowledge. She was up in Tokyo recently for 6 months, am I correct, to go and learn from Tokyo Marathon, and has great aspirations to lift events in Jakarta and indeed in Indonesia. And has got an incredible story. I'm so excited to hear the background to this amazing impact that you've created in Indonesia for runners generally, and particularly for women runners. Not always easy for Muslim women runners to get out and participate and run. Let's go back to the start. When would you say that running actually started here? And you've got an incredible story of how it started, but what year was it that, you know, running started to happen here in Indonesia?
Actually, I started running, and I started to create a community, the first community in Jakarta, actually, back in 2006, where nobody were running on the street. So I started running on the street every morning, 5 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. We always start early morning in Jakarta because of the heat. And then, at the time, I didn't have a nice experience because people see me as a crazy woman who squeezes herself between the motorbikes and the cars. So I get a lot of bad experience because a lot of harassment on the street. And then by the time I moved to, I tried to find a very nice place to run. And then I started running at the zoo, where I finally met a few, 5 people, expatriate club. Then I start running together with them. And then from then we always running together almost every day. And then we start thinking that, let's make a small community in Jakarta. And then we call it the Jakarta Free Spirit Running Club. That's the first running club in Indonesia, actually. Yeah.
That's amazing. And that when I introduced you, Dunia, Olah, Raga means the Free Spirit Running Club. Yeah, that's a translation. Riena, and you mentioned that expats to start with, and then some of those expats started bringing their Indonesian wives and partners along to run. You were running in the zoo because it was the only place where it was kind of safe to run. And then if you did longer runs, you kind of went from village to village. And then you took this step to organize a running event. And it must have been heartbreaking. And I've been there having set up events with far more than the 5 runners you got for your first run, you know, starting events way back in my Zimbabwean days with a handful of runners, but 5 runners, you didn't give up. That grew to 25. And you know, it's now created this movement. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you linked it with the health and fitness industry, because there wasn't a big consciousness of health and fitness, and you set up you know, training courses to accredit health and fitness instructors. So not only have you kind of spawned a running industry, but you've helped spawn a health and fitness industry. Give us a little bit of that story, please.
Yes. So I actually, at the time, I was still working full time as a fitness trainer. And then at the time, we had a very few fitness or sport recreation in Jakarta. And then I started to make my own gym together with the friends. And then actually, it's a very small gym, but and then we are thinking like, oh, I really want to learn how to, you know, how to have a good personal trainer in Indonesia. Then we start, me and my friend start thinking that we create a school, a fitness school, the first fitness school in Jakarta. We teach them how to have a basic 1 to 6 as a personal trainer. At the time, our market is still foreigners or expats who live in Jakarta. And then from there, we start running together. And then, but we always see the same person. We always see the same race course all the time, the race running route every day. And then, okay, let's start something exciting. And then we create the first running event in Jakarta, which is a Jakarta Free Spirit Race Running Cities, which is involved the 4 international school in Jakarta. And at the time, we only 5 people who turned up to the race, which is including me. And then, but we never stop. And then we keep continue. And the next year, it was very surprising that we have 25 people who join, actually the student and the teacher. So from that, we keep doing until in 2012, we had a very, very big number of people who joined. I think around like 500 or something, and we sold out like straight away. But at the time, we didn't have any orientation to have you know, it's all about the charity. Through the club, we also sponsor the street kids in Jakarta. We funding them with the running shoes. So we encourage them to running, and we give them a free salt to our race, something like that, Chris. Yeah.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about, so of those 5 runners and those 25 and those 500, what were the percentages of women that were participating in those events back at that stage?
Oh, actually, coming from the Muslim country, actually, I'm very amazed with the woman in Indonesia. But because we are very limited to the news, we are very limited to the, you know, sport information. We are very limited to the outfit at the time. So it's difficult for women to run. But actually, the biggest number at the time I start to teach people or to train people, actually the biggest number are women here. And then from there, they encourage the kids and the husband to join. So I'm really you know, amazed to the woman in Indonesia because of the condition, everything here. So yeah, women still become as a leader here in the sport industry. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And for those that are the uninitiated, tell them a little bit of those challenges of being a woman running here. So, you know, the stigma of being seen outside, obviously the need to wear in many instances the hijab and other clothes, and not be able to run in typical running clothes that many would expect us. You know, for those that are maybe not aware, share some of the constraints that they face.
Yeah. So back in 2006 or until 2008, I mean, we had a very, I think like 1 or 2 running shop here, and it's not a running shop, actually, the sport clothes and shop. So we always running with a sport outfit because it's very hot in Jakarta. So it's very comfortable without a sleeve here running. But the people are quite like surprised to see what are they doing on the street, running with a short and with a short sleeve. So they try to to harass the woman in Jakarta. And then slowly and slowly we also start to bring another outfit to Jakarta and many varieties now. So from 2012 until 2023 now, we have so many varieties, we have so many sports show actually is coming because of the running lifestyle. It's growing very, very much in Jakarta, in Indonesia actually.
And how is that attitude now? I mean, from you being harassed on the days that you were running back when you started in 2006. And this is incredible, isn't it? I mean, we've gone from the Bostons and the London marathons that have been on this call earlier with over 100 years of history to 20 odd years here, and well, not even 20 years in Indonesia. But how are those attitudes starting to change towards, I mean, do you now find that most women feel safe and comfortable when they run on the streets?
Right now, yes, it's very comfortable. I mean, we don't have any more harass on the street, but still we have to squeeze ourselves between the motorbikes and the car. But still, I mean, like, we are quite safe. And then because now the male participant also is increasing, so it's quite equal between women and men participant. But only still, I really want to encourage friends and female running fellows from Jakarta to encourage the long distance running.
Yeah. And so one of the things talking about places to run was the car-free day. So the closure of the major street in Jakarta, which is used for cycling and running. Tell us a little bit about that initiative.
Yeah. In 2007, actually, the government started to create the car-free day, which is every Sunday. There is no car allowed to the main street from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. every Sunday morning. So at the time, people will complain about it because, like, what are they doing? I mean, like, but it's a great opportunity to my club and I to bring the running and to have people who join us along the car-free day, something like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Talk to us a little bit about the Jakarta Marathon. So you're the race director of the Jakarta Marathon. And give us a sense of where the industry's come to in this relatively short 20 years. How many participants? Tell us a little bit about the story of the Jakarta Marathon, which is coming up in October. How many you're expecting this year, and what percentage of those are men and what percentage are women?
For the Jakarta Marathon, they start 2013. So at the time, like, I think is for the marathon distance, there is only like 200 people who join for the 42 kilometers. And then now we have more 2,500 for that category. In total, we have 16,000 for the 4 categories. We are still having a marathon, half marathon, 10 and 5K on the same day. So the difference between male and female runners actually is quite big because for the marathon distance, it's like 30 to 70%. 70% are males. I mean, like, but for the half marathon, actually is very equal, and also the 5K is more like the kids and the woman and kids, or woman with children, something like that, Chris. So this year I still expected like the 16,000, but to bring the a better facility, a better quality for the Jakarta Marathon this year.
And in terms of making, in terms of making that now more accessible for women, are you seeing that there's more clubs coming up that are focused on women? Is it being more engaged in schools, that pathway being created? Are there more kind of sports clubs that are giving the pathway to women to participate?
I think the running community start from the mom actually in Jakarta, because they have more time, and then also in the morning they bring the kids to school and then they join the fitness, and from there they join the running club, and also they start also shopping. So it's actually yeah, we all started from women in Jakarta, so very excited about it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. We've only got about 2 minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any particular aspiration? Any way that people on this call might be able to help you in that journey?
Actually, yes, because you know, I mean, like from a woman in Jakarta who love running, it's quite difficult because we have a very limited information. How, I mean, like the actually it's totally different, like between male and females, right? So yeah, that's very confusing right now. I mean, like we're not talking about the non-binary. We are still talking about the males and female in Jakarta, and it's very a little bit big, a big gap between those category. So yeah, I actually want to learn more and how to give the sport knowledge, sport education to the female, because we all need it here in Asia, actually. I mean, particularly in Indonesia.
Wonderful. Hopefully there's some people that can help you. And I know we're hopefully going to catch up in Bali soon and talk about some of that. Riena, it's been wonderful to hear your inspirational story. Congratulations on all that you've achieved, and much more to come, I'm sure. Safe travels to Boston. I'm sure you're going to learn plenty and connect with plenty of people there. But look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So we're getting close to the final lap now. One more segment before we call on Alessio Punzi to give us some updates from World Athletics. Now we head back across the world to Philadelphia in the US, and delighted and excited to hear from another inspiring woman. Her name is Vanessa Peralta-Mitchelll, and she's the owner of VCPM. And she's going to share with us this amazing initiative that she's created. It's called the Game Changers Program, Empowering Women of Color as Certified Run Coaches. And it's going to be a presentation, so I'm going to jump into the background. But first, I'm going to say a big hello, Vanessa. Lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for taking the almost final lap.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Definitely let me know if you can't see my screen, but I do have it up.
Yeah, we can see that. All good.
Okay, awesome. So hi, everyone. It's definitely a blessing to be here with you all. And definitely special thank you to you, Chris and Alessio, for putting this all together and just recognizing the need for an inclusion webinar. I want to say thank you too to the other speakers. I've taken so many good notes, and I just thank you for all the insight and knowledge you've all been sharing. So I definitely want to share a little bit about who I am, and more importantly, what we do through our Game Changers program. But first, I wanted to start by talking about the sport of running. Because when you think about it, sports is one of the most visible and powerful social institutions in the world. So those who are seen and known in the world of sports, like leaders and experts and coaches, well, that communicates who's important, relevant, and valued. So what happens when industry experts are a group predominantly of the same gender and the same race? Women from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color community in particular can feel unseen, unheard, and undervalued, especially when it comes to what we bring to the expert table. The thing is, we are here, and we need more women of color as certified run coaches, because ultimately, this means more community leaders, more diverse health advocates, and more role models to the generations that follow us into this sport. So you might be thinking, how do we do this? And our answer is simple: Game Changers, a program that brings in more women of color as certified run coaches so we can redefine who people see as those experts and leaders in the running industry. My name is Vanessa Peralta-Mitchelll, as Chris said, and I'm the proud owner of VCPM Inc. and the creator of our Game Changers program. But before I go into all the specifics, I did want to share with you all why being visible is so important to me. So many years ago, right, even way before I thought about running my first marathon, my parents came here from Ecuador. And as a first generation, I would speak on my mom's behalf. Now, this would be anywhere from like the grocery store to asking for bank deposit slips on the bank floors. You know, I was her voice in this English-speaking world. And somewhere along this run journey, I found my voice. And I started to connect the dots how being a voice for my Spanish-speaking mom enabled me to use that voice to amplify others. And what I really started to realize is that the voices unheard in the room, well, that resonates to me, to my core. And I no longer wanted us to wait for our turn to be heard. I no longer wanted us to be invisible. And with our Game Changers program, we're doing that tenfold. 89% of our game changers have gained confidence as a run coach as a result of our program. And what's even more amazing is that 68% have gained confidence in other areas of their life too. We are empowering women of color and making the leap from community runner to industry leader. And the best part is we're just getting started. We've seen 50% growth with new interests coming in from both Canada and South America. And what started off as a goal to fund just 5 women has now grown to us having 75 coaches in 25 states. And our projections show us coaching close to 800 runners with this current group of coaches. So I just want you to take a second, right, and think about that ripple effect of all those coaches or all those runners being coached by a woman of color, and the message of accessibility that we're driving, not only to the sport of running, but to run leadership. And that's how I can boldly join you all here today and say that we are in fact changing the game. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to share some insights, what we've learned through creating Game Changers, so that you have some takeaways to address inclusion in your events. So from the very beginning, and I've heard it common throughout some of the speakers, was, the idea of, what barriers can we address? So we understood that from the very beginning, simply identifying the problem. So for us, that was the lack of women of color coaches. Well, identifying the problem, that wasn't enough. And before providing a solution, we really needed to understand why this was a problem in the first place. So what barriers were we as women of color facing to become coaches? And so from our own data collection, we identified 3 main barriers: awareness, access, and cost. Our program provides funds for run coach certification, mentorship by fellow women of color coaches who are accomplished coaches themselves, and business coaching so our Game Changers can strategize how best to use their run coach certification. Now, when you think about it, and I know you're probably thinking, what problem are you trying to solve? Especially when it comes to the topic at hand, of course, right? When it comes to inclusion and diversity at your races. And before you answer that, just take some time to identify, why is this a problem in the first place? And what barriers are people facing to be a part of your races? One of the things I wanted to share today is in doing the work that we do with Game Changers, we've identified that race organizers are aiming to diversify their road races, as you all well know. But in fact, 88% of the race directors we interviewed across the US recognized the importance of diversity. But the thing is, they're either unsure or unsuccessful in doing so. And a part of that is understanding what are the barriers for the communities we seek to serve, because then we can provide the proper support needed and not merely what we believe to be the quote unquote solution. So let's think about that, right? Maybe some of those barriers of cost, of course, right? But maybe identify what type of cost, right? That could be the cost of a race entry, cost of proper attire, cost of shoes leading up to race day, maybe a barriers for training. And maybe that's for the beginner runner, the new runner, just getting coaching in general to get them to your starting line. Or maybe a barrier is accessibility to paths and trails to train on. The list can go on and on and on. But the idea here is not to provide solutions for all the barriers that you may uncover, but addressing that one barrier, right, that you can do something about. So it's important to note that, without diving into the problem, you may provide a solution that falls flat. So one that I've seen when races is that they provide free race entries, which is a great thing to offer. But I encourage you to go one step further and think about this. Simply making an opportunity available doesn't address the barriers to take advantage of that opportunity or the support that is needed once a person has access to it. So for example, even though 58% of game changers shared that cost was their #1 barrier to becoming a run coach, and even though we've partnered and worked directly with the Road Runners Club of America to address this challenge, what if we stopped at funding, right? What if we didn't provide the mentorship or the business coaching? We would simply be providing our coaches an opportunity without any real investment in their success. Because the end goal for Game Changers is to stay in this space, right? Because that's how we drive this industry change. So then all three components become crucial to keeping us in the industry, much like how you all want a new runner to stay with your race and drive diversity to your starting lines. So we took a look at identifying the barriers, and you may be thinking, how do I do that, right? We took the three lenses about the problem, the barriers, and the support needed. So now I'm going to share with you about the importance of data. We recognize from the beginning that there isn't a lot of data, as you would guess, on coaches, especially post-collegiate coaches, and there's even less data on women of color coaches. So we decided, you know what? We're going to collect the data ourselves. And thanks to our partnership with Brooks, we've been able to quantify our impact with groundbreaking data that we've collected on women of color coaches and the impact our Game Changers program has had on the industry. We've had the blessing to work with Dr. Courtney Boucher of the Tucker Institute on research on girls and women in sport, who has done data analysis that tells us things such as 40% would not have registered to be a certified run coach without the Game Changers program. 93% have used the run coach certification since being involved in our program. And 42% have also used their certification to start a run coach side business. And 74% of Game Changers athletes felt healthier as a result of working with our Game Changer coaches. So what does this look like for you, right? So this is actually a bit of an intertwined answer, but I'm going to start by saying the information that you seek, it's already at your fingertips. It's your runners. Now they can give you a metric to work against, right? Which gives you a great way to measure change. Think of the information that you can leverage with the data you collect from your registrants and the message you are sending about the importance of knowing your runners and the value you are placing on them being seen and included in your events. Now, I know we have the gamut of people on this call, so whether that means 500 or 50,000 runners, I cannot stress enough the importance of collecting data from the runners who sign up for your race. And a side note, of course, you can always have people opt out for particular answers to questions that they may not want to answer. But you may be thinking, okay, I understand this importance, but what to ask? What am I supposed to ask, Vanessa? Well, here's where the intertwined part comes into play. So, are things like inclusion and diversity a part of your mission? And is it seen and known to your runners? So there are so many races to choose from. As you know, we have a plethora here tonight. But one simple way to stand out is for runners to feel connected with your race, to be in alignment with your mission. They want to feel a part of something bigger. And if they are aware of your mission, and if you communicate that message, which incorporates that inclusion component, then there's no need to shy away from questions that address this mission, such as race and gender, and perhaps perceived barriers, because in that shared mission, they understand that they are a part of the change that you are propelling forward. So for us, the #1 reason women of color applied to be a part of the Game Changers was overwhelming. That was, they believe in the mission to redefine who people see as the experts and leaders in the run industry. And here's what the data tells us, which is a direct quote from page 34 of our report, but I'm happy to share a one-pager that I do have for anyone that's interested. But it reads, Game Changers provides a springboard for women in the running industry by not only removing financial barriers to certification, but also teaching women how to strategically create a business around their passion for running and creating change. And also, every single participant surveyed would recommend the program to others, which certainly speaks volumes. So if I can share an example of alignment and mission and the importance of data with you all. The Credit Union Cherry Blossom Race, now that's in Washington, D.C., they're one of our supporting sponsors. They not only share their mission of inclusion with their runners and how it drives their actions, but they have things that tie back to the mission, right? So things such as a designated DEI committee, specifically programming, expo programming that speaks to the need for diversity of the sport, data they collect on race and gender, all these things that tie back to their mission. So it became clear and apparent that the work that they do aligns with the work that we do, and the partnership was formed. Now, a result that we formed from that partnership was a unique aspect between the Game Changers and Cherry Blossom, with a collaboration of coaches, where their longtime coach mentored and also learned from our 2 local DC area Game Changers. So this unified coaching effort of both lived and learned experience is testament to the future of running, where there is room for all of us to have a seat and a voice at the expert table. And as we look to work with mid-size US road races in the future, we're definitely excited about possibilities like this. Other possibilities such as providing online training that's powered by our network of women of color coaches, and just to be a source for expo programming with our panel of Game Changer coaches. Again, when thinking about the importance of data, think about how you can leverage your mission and your data, which are 2 resources that you have within your grasp already. So this is how we all play a part in the future of running, by actively and intentionally driving inclusion for the betterment of the sport of running. So the Game Changers program, I'm proud to say, is poised to play an important role in the leadership pipeline. 26% of our coaches go on to obtain additional certifications. We have race directors, strength trainers, those who are being quoted in articles, being asked to sit on panels, building training programs for signature races, those that are leading the way on a whole bucket list of facets. And what I shared with you today is just a few ways that we have used the vehicle of coaching to prioritize inclusion and drive diversity within the running space. So I ask you, don't you want to be part of building the pipeline for the future of your races, for the future of the industry, and ultimately for the future of the sport of running? Think about what role will your race play in building that pipeline. Now, these insights we shared today should give you a good starting line. And in closing, I wanted to share, crossing the Philadelphia Marathon, crossing that finish line led me to be seen as an expert among my peers. And that really catapulted me in getting my run coach certification, which eventually led me to building my own business and building a program to redefine run leadership. So think about all the runners that toe the line at your race. You can be their on-ramp for industry change. In true fashion, I now pass the baton to you all, right? With a few quick reminders. The first is that comfort does not contribute to growth. You can ask any of your runners and they can certainly attest to that. And the second thing is that these things take time, effort, and resources, and forward movement, it looks different for everybody. But remember that gone are the days of us being siloed, and it's now about how we all work together to drive inclusivity and change the game together. So there's my contact information on our website. I do have a quick 1-minute video to share about the Game Changers program, and I welcome you to reach out to me directly for any connections or questions. But I'm going to stop my desktop share and pass it back to Chris.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Wonderful. Comfort does not contribute to growth. I love that. It takes time and effort. Vanessa, let's just play your video, and Mikey's just cueing that, and then I'll come back to you again once the video is finished. Thank you so much for the presentation, though.
Running can just have a greater impact than just getting a medal and a t-shirt.
Game Changers has been a massive support, and I truly believe that each and every woman of color coach that comes through the Game Changers program is going to go out there and make a massive difference.
What we're doing here is honing in specifically on women of color and their journey into becoming a leader and expert in this space. There are 3 components to the Game Changers program: certification funding, mentorship, and the third is business strategy.
My life has changed as a result of Game Changers, as I was recruited as the head coach for BGRU.
Their guiding light is a woman of color. And to know that that guiding light is a game changer, that speaks to impact like never before.
I don't have to sit in the back. I'm right here. I'm in the front. I'm on the start line.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Vanessa. We'll say goodbye to you at this stage. You've obviously got your contact details there. Congrats on the amazing impact that you're making. And I'm sure that ripple effect, as you referred to earlier, is going to continue to ripple across the USA and other countries and hopefully across the globe. Look forward to meeting you in person one day soon. Bye-bye. Thank you. Next up, as we get to the final lap, is Alessio Punzi, who hopefully needs no introduction, but I think his new title does, Head of Running and Mass Participation in Athletics. Congratulations, Alessio.
Same job as before, really.
Same job as before, doing awesome work. Over to you to give a World Athletics update, please, Alessio.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And really, thank you to the 100 people who are still with us today. It's been a long session, but one that I really enjoyed. It was very much needed, and I would like to invite everyone to the next World Athletics Road Races webinar, which will be again on the theme of the inclusion, diversity, and equity, which will be hopefully no more than 6 weeks, ideally at the end of May, last Wednesday or Thursday in May. Chris and I will inform everyone of the date. Another thing that I would like to share with you is our inner workings when it comes to labor road racing regulations. This is the central program of World Athletics in the non-championships running space. 2023 edition has been pretty solid. 250 races are in the system. There have been a few things that need to be improved. We are aware that the mechanism of athlete with gold or platinum status can be perfected. We endeavor to do that next year. A consultation has already started informally with regard to where do we want to go with this. Ideally, we would like to publish the 2024 regulations at some point in June. The application, the window for applications will ideally open in August or September, as is usually the case, but we would like to be in a position in which you race organizers, you athletes reps know before the summer what are the rules of the game for 2024. It is possible that we will have to cap the number of platinum and gold labor races at the top, simply because it's important for us to respect that categorization of races, especially if you consider how important the World Athletics rankings are becoming for all things Olympics and World Championships qualification. So stay tuned for labor race regulations consultation first, and then publication of the regulations at some point in May, towards the end of May. The other update that you might have seen a few weeks ago was that the World Athletics Council has reinstated, with a number of caveats and conditions, the Athletics Federation of Russia. Clearly, at the same time, there are the sanctions in place for the invasion of Ukraine applied onto Russia and Belarus. Therefore, it's still not possible for road races in these competitions to obtain World Athletics label, to have World Championships, and a whole range of topics. However, athletes of Russian nationality are in principle now allowed to compete at events internationally. We still encourage labor road races to use the same approach that Diamond League and World Athletics Series events, namely World Championships, are adopting, but in principle, the athletes, the authorized neutral athlete status for athletes of Russian nationality is no more. They no longer need to obtain this status. Other update, World Championships in Budapest. There will be, for a selected number of labor road races, the ability to obtain tickets, and in some cases also accreditation. If you're interested, reach out to me. My contacts are what they know, so let me know in case you're planning to come to Budapest. Even bigger and even more running center will be the Road Running Championships, which will take place in Riga on the 30th of September and 1st October 2023. They will encompass a half marathon, as it's been the case for many, many years. But on top of that, we also have a mile race, road mile, and a 5K. The other interesting bit for us, running community, is that the event will be preceded by a World Athletics road race seminar. We will kick things off Thursday night with a welcome cocktail. Then all day on Friday, there will be the conference, the seminar proper, and then we will all enjoy the races. As is customary, there will be complimentary access and meals for all labor race organizers. More information will be shared shortly. However, save the date. It's the last weekend in September. Sunday, 1st of October. So last weekend in September, first weekend in October. This is the peak of the road running season. I myself will be at the London Marathon in a few days' time. So in case you're there, pop a line. Let's meet for a cup of tea and chat. Dr. Paolo and Adami, together with other World Athletics colleagues, will be at the Boston Marathon. So in case you want to have a deeper discussion with him and with the rest of our health and science team on the new BSD regulations, transgender regulations, how that may work and how they may be relevant for you organizers, reach out to Paolo. In case you don't have Paolo's contact, ping me and I'll connect you. Then next year in February, on the 8th and 9th of February, World Athletics, in conjunction with Nilayo Sports, organizer of the Lagos City Marathon, will hold the first ever World Athletics Africa Running Conference. It will be a pretty cool event. We're excited to be working on it already. There will be the usual economic impact and running as a social phenomenon part. It will be also accompanied by a series of technical workshops, which are very much needed given the growth trajectory of the sport in the region. So there will be course measurement activities and technical delegates workshop in Lagos, first week of February. Stay tuned for the announcement. Obviously, even if you're not an African road race organizer, you're very much welcome to participate. And then finally, I would like to stress the importance of course measurement at the moment at World Athletics. Earlier, Paolo mentioned this World Athletics ranking scheme. What does that mean? It means that for a competition to count, for athletes to score points for the rankings, which in turn allow them to, qualify for World Championships and Olympics, but also a range of other benefits, because rankings are just a tool. The competition needs to be part of the World Athletics ranking scheme. Now, if you are a labor race organizer, if your event is a labor road race, nothing you have to do. It's by default included. Similarly for national championships, for area championships, for awards, and Olympics. But in case you are the organizer of races without a World Athletics label, you want to be there. You want to be a World Athletics rankings competition. There is no fee, it's just a very small admin fee of, if I'm not mistaken, around $25 a year. So it's just to cover the administration cost. The important bit is that your race course has to be World Athletics certified. The World Athletics certification is free of cost. All you need to do to achieve that is having your course measured by a World Athletics certified, World Athletics accredited measure, and there are many hundreds of them. If you have doubts, get in touch. At the same time, Area Athletics Association and National Athletics Association are more and more organizing courses. So if you have an interest in becoming a World Athletics accredited measurer, reach out to me or to AIMS or to any existing measurer. We will point you towards the right direction, so that, if you don't have a World Athletics accreditation for measurer, you can obtain one. If you already are a measurer, we can help you get to the international level. If you are European, there will be a big course coming up in Rome at the end of October. Reach out to your member federation in case you're interested, or to me or to European Athletics as ever. And I believe this is all the updates I had, Chris. I would like to thank you for your beautiful moderating once again. You are not rusty one bit. It's just as smooth and as good as it used to be. And I look forward to the next one. Thank you for being here today. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Alessio, for the kind words, and as always, the opportunity to be here. A few other big thank yous. Thank you to all of our speakers. It's been a long session, and to all of you that have stayed the distance with us. As I mentioned at the top of the show, almost 300 people from 64 countries registered. So many great presentations, so many great insights. I've learned so much tonight and really enjoyed the interaction. I will go through the chats afterwards. If there's anything that was missed, we'll do our best to get back to anybody who had any questions. And of course, as always, contact Alessio directly or myself, chris@massparticipationworld.com, if there's any way that I can help you with any of the follow-up. Lots of takeouts, so many takeouts, but three that kind of stood out for me. Make a start. You don't have to be perfect to get going with this great initiative, this great and important initiative for our industry, the inclusion episode and the inclusion and diversity that we need so much across all and so many aspects of our industry. consult and engage. So many people willing to help, from the very top of the pyramid at Abbott World Marathon Majors events to the importance of consulting with your stakeholders, as we heard from Hamid, all of the communities that you run through, importance of consulting with disabled athletes and bringing them to the table to get the insights from them, always willing to share and help. And then the final one, which obviously came as no surprise, this enormous opportunity that we have as an industry to create huge social impact. There's been a huge focus in recent times on sustainability in terms of environmental sustainability, but really social sustainability, social impact is so crucial, and this enormous industry of ours can make, I believe, a huge impact in that space. Just a couple of quick housekeepings. As I mentioned, we are live streaming on Facebook, so if any of your colleagues would like to watch, it's on the Mass Participation World Facebook page. We're also recording, and within the next few days we will get out the recording, the edited recording to you. The 2 decks that were presented will be available. We will make those available as well. The various emails that were shared in the chat, we'll make them available to you as well. And really very much looking forward to round 2 of this. As Alessio said, we'll get back to you most likely late in May for the next edition of the inclusion episode. Thank you so much for your attendance, your support, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Have a great day, great night, great evening.